So for this video, we're going to be looking at using the base angles theorem and its converse. So remember, that tells us for a triangle, if two sides are congruent, then the angles opposite of those two congruent sides are also congruent. And then we have the converse of that. So if in a triangle I have two congruent angles, then the sides opposite of those congruent angles are also congruent. So for number one, we have triangle DF, and I know that DE is congruent to a DF, and that is marked on my figure here with those red tick marks. I want to name two congruent angles. Well, I know from my base angles theorem that the angles opposite or across from my congruent sides are also congruent. So the angle across from DF is angle E, and from DE is angle F. So I know that angle E is congruent to angle F. Number two, I want to complete the statement. So this first statement says if HG is congruent to HK, then, and I want to figure out which two angles are congruent. So I have HG is congruent to HK. So if HG is congruent to HK, and now I know from my base angles theorem that the angles opposite of that are also congruent. So I have that angle HGK is congruent to angle HKG. Now for the next statement, I am instead given two angles that are congruent. So I'm going to be using the converse of my base angles theorem. So this one says if angle KHJ is congruent to KJH, then I'm going to figure out which sides are congruent to each other. So KHJ, that's this angle here, is congruent to KJH. And so I know from my converse that the sides opposite of these angles are also congruent. So opposite of this one is HK. Congruent to the opposite of this angle is KJ. Okay, number three, this one's telling me to find the measure of angle G. So I see I have an isosceles triangle here. I know that because I have two congruent sides. And now I know from my base angles theorem that the sides opposite, or the angles opposite of these congruent sides are also congruent, or across from it. So I know that angle G is congruent to angle J. So that means that x plus 44 is equal to 3x. Now I'm going to solve for x, so subtract x from both sides. And then divide both sides by 2. And I get that 22 is equal to x. But now I need to make sure that I read my question. My question is asking me to find the measure of angle G. So I need to actually plug that x back in to find what angle G is equal to. So instead of x plus 44, I'm going to put 22 plus 44. So the measure of angle G is equal to 66 degrees. Okay, now let's look at number 4. So number 4 is really similar to number 3. I want to find the measure of angle N. I again have an isosceles triangle. I see that from my two congruent sides. And then I know from the base angles theorem that the angles across from those are also congruent. So I know that angle N is congruent to angle P. So go ahead and pause the video. I want you to finish off this problem. When you think you have it, go ahead and press play. So the answer you should have gotten here is 48 degrees. Since angle N is congruent to angle P, I know that they are equal to each other. And so solving for y, I got 8. And then when I plug that back in for measure of angle N, I got 48 degrees. Okay, let's do a few more. So another problem that you may see that's dealing with the base angles converse is something like this. So For number 5, I want to find x. I'm given the vertex angle is 40 degrees, and then I want to find the value of x. So using my base angles theorem, I know that the sides opposite of my congruent sides or the angles opposite are congruent. So I know that angle B is therefore congruent to angle C. So that means that angle B is also going to be 9x plus 7 degrees. Now I figure out, how do I go from here? Well, I need to remember back to the first lesson in this unit where we learned about the triangle sum theorem, and that told us that all the angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees. And so I have my 3 angle measures, so now I just need to add all of those up and set it equal to 180. So 9x plus 9x, I get 18x. 7 plus 7, I get 14. 14 plus 40, I get 54. Subtract 54 from both sides, and I get that 18x is equal to 126. And then divide both sides by 18. And I get that x is equal to 7. So here it's okay if you get a problem like this, just remember again your theorem here, and then you can always use a triangle sum theorem after that. So number 6 is really similar. I want to find the measure of angle n now though, not just x. I have 2 congruent sides, so I know the angles opposite of them are also congruent. So that means the angle n is also going to be 4x minus 11. And so from here, I need to use my triangle sum theorem. So go ahead and pause the video. I want you to finish this out. When you think you have it, go ahead and press play. So the answer you should have gotten is 73 degrees. Using my triangle sum theorem, I added all 3 angles up and set equal to 180. And when I solved that, I got x equals 21. This question was asking me to find the measure of angle n, so I had to plug that back in to get my angle n measured. Okay, and then we also have the converse of the base angles theorem, and again, that told us that if we have 2 angles that are congruent, then the sides opposite of those congruent angles are also congruent. So that means that AB is equal to AC here, and so I have 8x plus 7 is equal to 3x plus 32, and then I can solve from here. So subtract 3x, and I get 5x plus 7 is equal to 32. Subtract 7 from both sides. And then divide both sides by 5. And I get that x is equal to 5. Looking back at my question, I want to find AB. So I need to plug x back in. And so when I do that, I get 8 times 5 plus 7. And so I get that AB is equal to 47. Number 2, very similar. I have 2 congruent angles, and so I want to find the length of DE, and so I know that the sides opposite of my congruent angles are also congruent. And so I get 4x minus 12 is equal to negative 2x plus 24. And then I can solve from here. So go ahead and pause the video. I want you to finish solving. When you think you have it, go ahead and press play. So the answer you should have gotten here was 12. When you're finding x, you should have gotten the x equals 6. And then plug that in for DE, and you get 12.